Welcome to Dead Genre Chronicles, a critical podcast on the diversity of JRPGs. Drawing from the origin of the genre to the present day, every month we play through a JRPG and we invite you to play along and send us your questions and thoughts on it. I'm Devin, a modular party member who grows by equipping items.
I'm Becky, I can't tell the difference between an adventure and a legend.
I'm Leroy, and in real life, my stats never go up either.
That's why I'm a modular party member, because I just need better equipment. So this month we're going to be talking about SaGa 1 and 2. Branded as Final Fantasy Legend when they were brought over in English, these two games were directed by Akitoshi Kawazu, who handled Final Fantasy 2, and differ quite greatly in terms of mechanics and content from the Final Fantasy games of the era. So it's weird that they got called Final Fantasy, but it was just a branding thing.
Well, I mean, it's weird, but it's not as weird as frickin' Final Fantasy Adventure, i.e. Seiken Densetsu, which, yes, let's get this out of the way first. When I started streaming Final Fantasy Adventure, not Final Fantasy Legend, because these games, there are too many, like, there's Final Fantasy Mystic Quest as well. Yeah. Square just need to stop, or, like, 1989 Square needed to stop.
Definitely.
The branding is weird, but it's like not as weird as calling Final Fantasy IV Final Fantasy II. It's just like they're all weird decisions.
Well, I mean, it says a lot about Final Fantasy and the role of Final Fantasy in the West, right? Like, it's, you know, people keep trying to put the history of Final Fantasy as the history of JRPGs, and if you do that, you get nonsense. And this isn't the biggest part of the reason why, but it's a good illustration of why, because Square slapped Final Fantasy on anything that they thought they needed to give a push to after the year of Final Fantasy when FF1 came out in the States. So this game is in this curious little way quite emblematic of, you know, it shows that this goes all the way back. You know, we're used to thinking of, Final Fantasy is a massive franchise now and huge and important, but it was always like a massive marketing exercise relative to the scale of the industry at the time.
Yeah, it's weird because like Final Fantasies, I'm not familiar with, like, 2 and 3 as much, but I know that, like, Final Fantasies 1 through 5 are all pretty normal-ass actual fantasy with some ancient mechanisms thrown in, like, the airship or whatever. And this is just like, no, there's robots. I'm also still weirded out that in SaGa 2, you can be a robot and your human dad is still a human dad? Like, it's so weird.
Yeah, like, these games don't really have lore.
Yeah, they don't really have coherency in the lore. Like, they have lore, but it's just kind of, like, dotted around. It's not, like, a tapestry. It's just kind of, like, a bunch of threads that happen to form a picture.
Bullet points on the back of the box.
Well, yeah, but actually it works really well. I mean, I guess the thing that interests me most, and it applies to both of these games in slightly different ways, is that, like, fundamentally they are still Dragon Quest games. They're games where you go to a location where there's a problem and you solve the problem and then you move on. But they are arranged more like the kind of hub structure of Mario World or even, like, the N64 kind of collectathon stuff. You know, you have a level and then the hub zone, and you have to do something in the level to unlock the next section of the hub. And particularly in SaGa 2, that comes across as really video gamey, because you're literally collecting, what are they called?
Magi.
Magi, that's right.
I also want to mention the DS remake of 2 and 3, and 2 is the one that overlaps with what we're talking about, but like there was a fan translation and they were called relics. So the term magi is really like a weird, I think it's just supposed to be like magical relics with the term is tsukumogami, which is like when an item is taken care of for a long time in Japanese folklore, a spirit grows inside of it. Kind of that sort of thing, I think, was the intended design, but that didn't really translate well to 1991 America. So...
Well, also, like, they don't spend any time in the game on what the Magi are. They're just widgets that you have to collect.
Yeah.
It's like stars in Mario.
Not good at localizations at all.
Yeah.
You could tell from the dialogue in the game. So
Well, you can tell, but like again, because it's such a lore-light game, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Like I found it kind of endearing, actually. The dialogue is so abrupt
And arbitrary.
Yeah, it's just like
We should say something after we kill this king, you scum. It's just like, whoa, where did that come from?
especially when you can. Sometimes you don't actually need to press the talk button. You just walk up to someone and it immediately goes into the conversation, and then the conversation rattles past really quickly as well.
Yeah, there's like, I don't know why, but like the first game doesn't have like pauses. It's just like, this is the script that is going to be read now, and it's going to happen all at once, which means like I turned up the text speed, and then like 4 different bosses had their entire speeches rattle off in like 3 seconds, and I was just like, okay, I can't do that because it's literally unreadable how fast it was going. It was just like, okay, that's wonky.
It's good. I guess I really actually enjoyed my time with these games. They're occasionally a little bit frustrating, and they are a deep, deep pool to stick your head in.
Yeah, I started latest out of all of us, and I had some trepidation because the first game at least just throws you in, doesn't tell you anything, because it's part of the era of like the manual, where like you want to look at the manual to figure out how stuff works before you get started. And then when I did that and talked to you guys about that, I was just like, okay, I kind of got my head around it. Then once I got past that initial bump, it was mainly just that bump that gave me issues, and I was just like, I cruised through that in like 2 days overall.
Yeah, the opening is super stark. Like, you start with one character, and the first thing you're supposed to do, and it doesn't actually outright tell you this, although there's an NPC you can talk to, is actually just go to a shop and recruit the remainder of your party.
Yeah.
Which
is Dragon Quest 3 as hell. Like, I just getting ahead of Leroy and saying, like, yeah, no, you have a main character, but also you just have to recruit your party, which is Dragon Quest 3.
With the big tower, actually, in the big large dungeon, I felt like it was like a post-wizardry game almost.
Yeah, I can see that.
In wizardry, you have to recruit your party too. Same difference. That's where they're all drawing from.
Yeah. When I fired it up without knowing what I was doing, I was just like, oh, I have a character. There's this town to the southeast. I'm going to go visit. And then I got one shot by a zombie. It was just like, oh, whoops.
Yep.
But SaGa 2 does a lot better at, like, compiling your party immediately, and also, like, giving you a helper to get you through the first, like, dungeon. And you need it because the encounter rate is awful, and you start out super weak. Holy shit, the encounter rate in SaGa 2 is the worst fucking thing in any fucking video game.
It is absurd, although, like, SaGa 1 is sometimes absurd. SaGa 1 in the final dungeon has this thing where if you turn around to go back, the encounter rate spikes like 10 times as bad. You cannot retreat in that dungeon at all relative to going forward.
I didn't know that.
Either I was like hilariously unlucky because I in the final dungeon of SaGa 1 I got stuck basically. I'd saved halfway up in a bad spot because I'd forgotten that I hadn't got enough elixirs, and I tried backtracking, and every time I turned back the encounter rate was like every 3 steps. But if I went forward, it was there would be 2 or 3 per room.
So, was that the part of the thing that was largely just like conveyor belts?
Yeah.
Because they could definitely separate those tiles into different encounter rates, and that would be so fucking mean. That's so mean!
Yes! That's why I didn't finish SaGa 1, which was the 3rd podcast game in a row that I didn't finish. Yeah.
So, we've kind of glossed over, like, we talked about difficulty a little bit, but, like, we haven't talked about the mechanics. The first game is more basic, and it basically only has, like, 3 classes? Because there's human, esper, or mutant, and different kinds of monsters.
Yeah.
Basically, the progression is, in SaGa 1 at least, for humans, you buy stat points and equipment. For espers, they will randomly increase their stats, completely randomly. Like, people who tell you, oh no, it's based on what you do. That's only true in SaGa 2 and, like, maybe the remake. But, like, in the original, it's completely fucking random. They also randomly gain abilities, which is why they're mutants/espers would be the more correct translation. But, completely randomly, based on chance. And they changed that in SaGa 2 again. So, basically the first hump is getting enough money to buy stat points for humans, and getting enough battles in to get stat points for your espers. And also, monsters can turn into other monsters if they eat meat drop monsters, which is why this episode is titled Skeleton Meat, because skeletons are a type of monster and they drop meat. We don't know.
Bone marrow.
Maybe, but also no.
Gross.
It drops meat on the bone.
It really does. It's kind of incredible. Although, I'm still torn as to whether skeleton meat or slime meat is the less appetizing prospect. Yeah, so the thing with monsters is the way the system works, you can kind of trick it into leveling your monster way higher than it should be in the first world. You can get a monster that's one tier down from the top tier in the first world, and that penultimate tier is such that if you get a monster of that tier, there's no circumstance where you can downgrade your monster by eating meat, because any meat will be either an upgrade or maintain it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it trivializes like the first 2 worlds of Saga 1 to just have this massive beefy monster.
I didn't even try to exploit it. I just ate every single meat that came in front of my monster just to see what would happen, and I ended up getting to that penultimate tier in the second world anyways. So it's just not really fine-tuned.
Yeah, it's also fucking incomprehensible because in the original there's no like preview or anything. It's just like, okay, you eat it or you don't. Have fun.
Do you want this?
But basically, abilities on espers and monsters heal at an inn, but otherwise everything has like a durability for attacks. So it's kind of stressful at first because you want to get money and stat points for humans and espers progression, but you also have to worry about your weapons breaking, and it sucks.
Yeah, it's really, really restrictive at first.
Which is why you want espers, like, early on you want your esper to have a bunch of good abilities, and they're randomly replaced, and it's awful.
And you can get duplicates, of the worst ability, which is ESP, which literally does nothing.
Yes.
And for most of the first world and a half, my mutant had 2 instances of ESP.
I ended up doing save state manipulation so that I would at least keep 1 slot of gas, which is like an earth type all-target spell that was pretty solid the entire first world.
The way targeting works makes magic like way better than physical.
Yeah.
Up to like a certain point where you're just fighting bosses and clearing groups doesn't matter that much anymore.
Yeah, also, like, I'm pretty sure that the way it handles targeting is just wizardry.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's a solid way to handle targeting with such low, like, memory and graphical limitations. It's good. It's just, it means that anything single target is going to be kind of crap compared to anything that targets a group or everything. Unless you're fighting a boss, in which case the things that target everything probably do more damage anyway, so...
Yeah, it's not the most balanced game.
Yeah.
Although, I guess, the thing is, the game is clearly, to whatever extent it has been tuned, it's been tuned for a very, very glass cannon sort of combat. This is true in Saga 1, it's much more true in Saga 2. Like, even the final boss of Saga 2 was like 6 turns at most. It's a really, like, the boss fights are so short, which is good. I like that. I'm all on board for that.
The thing about the tuning in Saga 1 is that once you have something that works, you're not going to really feel any push at it until you get to the end of the game, and they're just like, well, fuck it, now everything's really hard, hopefully your party's good.
Yeah.
And so you won't feel any resistance, and you might not even really learn how you need to be playing until you get to the end, and it's like, yeah, I hope you've been doing everything. I hope your humans have mass stats. I hope you're ready for this.
Mm.
I remember the first time I played, I wasn't, but I just used the chainsaw on the creator anyway, so it didn't matter. But on this playthrough, I actually had to save scum in order to beat the creator. I had to keep loading different seeds until I didn't die instantly when it started spamming flare.
I did the chainsaw because we might have mentioned this. The final boss is God, and also he is weak to a chainsaw due to a programming error.
I mean, I'm not sure what the final boss is. It could be like the creator of the tower, the creator of the game. They don't really care.
It's actually Akitoshi Kawazu.
But basically, there's a programming error where like the chainsaw is a weapon that basically is supposed to be like if something is below a certain defense threshold, it can instantly kill them. But instead, it goes the opposite way. So if it's anything over a defense threshold, it can instantly kill them, including the final boss. Which is fun and also very satisfying.
Isn't there a reference to that in Final Fantasy 13 or one of them?
There is. Final Fantasy 13's final boss, Orphan, has a final form, and when you stagger it, like, he's completely immune to damage until you stagger it, at which point he becomes vulnerable to normal damage, but also vulnerable to death. Just, you have a death spell, and if you have Vanille in the party, you can just whip that out at the final boss as a giant fuck you. And they put that in there intentionally as a tribute to this, which is cute.
Yeah.
That's pretty weird. But that is interesting to me because it suggests a much stronger recollection of this game on the part of FF13's a big development team.
Mm-hmm.
Than we would have any idea was a possibility in the West. Like, if you'd told me the designers of FF13 were making callbacks to a 1989 Game Boy game that I wouldn't have heard of 5 years ago, that's weird.
The SaGa games have like a niche fan base in Japan, though. Actually, a lot more popular there.
Yeah, we actually have a question about this. It's from Video Game King. Why do you think SaGa games tend to do better in Japan than outside of it? The series tends to do well critically in Japan, but the consensus among English-speaking players is that the games are very hard to get your head around. Obviously can't speak for, like, the entire series, but the ones that people probably would have played because they were branded Final Fantasy, these were a little hard to get my head around, and also they can be pretty brutal.
I think it's, a lot of it is just that, like, they take Dragon Quest in a very different direction, even to quite early Final Fantasies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these are much more systems games, whereas Final Fantasy steadily has become much more narrative and much less systemy.
Yeah, even as they try to jam systems, like, back into stuff, they definitely went on a narrative tangent compared to Dragon Quest.
I don't know, like, I can't say why it's popular in Japan, I don't know that, but I'm pretty sure why it's not popular in the West here is that it doesn't have the typical arc of leveling and amassing power and having enemies, like, get powerful with you in that clear, like, there's not really a clarity in what you're doing and how your levels work. Like, you could be playing the whole game weak and then suddenly you're extremely powerful at the end, or you can get really unlucky with your growths in SaGa 2 and have characters that are just not very strong at all. And I think that the RPG player is used to or wants to have clarity both in goals and progression, and the SaGa games don't really tell you why you're adventuring or what you're doing, and they're also, like, really opaque with the systems. But even the ones that aren't opaque, like, you can figure out that in SaGa 2, when I attack, my stats go up, but they don't always go up, and they might not even go up enough for you to beat a boss, and that would be really frustrating to a Western player compared to, like, the RPGs they like, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's not very meritocratic.
Yeah.
Or its version of meritocracy is so closely tied to, you have to pay for it. Yeah, you can't, it's not a one-to-one kind of time input to reward. You can buy power, but even then it's not obvious how. Like, it's so laborious to figure out which weapon to buy, for example. And, like, because the shops aren't terribly stratified as you go up the tower or as you go through the worlds in SaGa 2, and the shop interface is so basic that it doesn't show you when a sword is an upgrade or what it'll do. So if you, like, towards the end of SaGa 2, if you didn't have, like, GameFAQs, you'd have to buy a sword, see what difference it made to your stats, and then sell it back if it wasn't the one you wanted.
Yeah.
And those, like, things get expensive towards the end of the game. And, you know, limited inventory space.
Very limited. Oof.
Particularly in SaGa 1. Like, in SaGa 1 you can carry 8 things. I think in SaGa 2 it's 16, and that was usually enough, except in the Nasty Dungeon, which is 10 floors of treasure, but...
I skipped the Nasty Dungeon because I was just like, well, at this point I'm already kind of cheating, so I'll just go finish the thing so I can be ready for the episode.
That's fair.
If I didn't do the Nasty Dungeon, I wouldn't have been able to beat the game, which is an interesting way it turned out.
Yeah.
Were you following that one guide that was like completely specific about builds?
No, I didn't do any guides, and I had problems. I had problems at the end because I didn't follow any guides.
Wow, that's brave.
Yeah, the guide I think Becky and I both used, or at least looked at, was overly specific to the point where they told you what to name the characters so they could just refer to them as their names, and I had to have, like, a legend so I could tell what a Final Fantasy legend, ha 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 ha. So I could tell what they were talking about, and thank you for not laughing at that joke.
It was a deliberate effort to just let it die.
Yeah, that guide is really intense. Like,
It's super
overbearing.
intense. Although, like, it's weird because that guide is really intense and overbearing. The guide that I used for SaGa 1 was far and away the most detailed walkthrough I've ever used. Like, it gave you a junction by junction account of the path through every dungeon. Walk east to the next junction, then walk north to the next junction, then east again, then north, then west, and like, it was actually really useful, except where you lost the thread.
Yep.
And then you were completely lost. But yeah, the thing that was good with that SaGa 2 guide was the detail on the builds, because there's a thing in SaGa 2 where when you have a sword equipped, it gives you a boost to your attack. But you can equip, like, multiple swords.
Yeah, on the robot, specifically.
Yeah. So my robot went into the final battle with 8 swords strapped to its face.
Fucking, oh my god, the fact, like...
Because it gives you, like, massive damage output, even though you're only using one of them.
Yes, this is how Gilgamesh works. Just more swords.
My human character actually had like sub 30 in all of her stats, so she couldn't do anything at all.
Oh
and
god.
I had her healing, but it doesn't really matter. And my mutant barely got 50 magic, which is still, I'm not doing any damage with him. So my only 2 like functioning party members were my monster and my robot. And through the whole game, I was using an agility robot, and what I would do with it would be just attack first with like the samurai bow and clear a group, and then let everyone else like whittle off the other monsters so I can hopefully get some stats. I never got any stats.
Yeah.
But at the end, I was like, I'm not gonna win. I'm gonna lose if I play like this. So I took everything off my robot and just put on 1 karate and the rest swords. All the swords I had. And went over the strength cap, and it was the same thing.
I cheated. I'm not gonna say I didn't. I cheated very early on because I was just like, I have like 3 days to finish this, and then we postponed the recording because I was gonna not finish it. But I ended up cheating, and I turned my fucking monster into a war machine, and then he ate a different monster and became a fucking... I think he was Byako or Seiryu. No, it was Susano. And a lot of high-level monsters have teleport, which made backtracking easy as pie.
That would have been an improvement.
Yeah, teleport, the earliest you can get it is like, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through the game on an Esper, and basically only tier 5 monsters have teleport in their lists. So having that way ahead of time was very nice, but also meant I didn't get enough battles, so I ended up just cheating all of my stats to 99 so I could finish on time. And even then, Arsenal still kicked my ass.
I ran away from most of my battles in... like, the second half of the game.
I remember you saying, like, oh yeah, I ran away from too many battles because the guide is saying, use this thing, I have 1 use of left, and it's just like, oh.
Oh yeah, the martial arts attack items, for some reason, get a massive boost to their damage output on their final use.
Yeah, the fact that they, like, turn martial arts into a disposable item is fucked. And the fact that they do so much damage the more you use them up until their final hit is just absurd. I do not understand that logic.
I think it was, like, I don't think it's a representational logic at all. Like, it's not trying to say, well, this is what martial arts is like. It's just, here's a different weapon system. But that's the attitude that pervades the game, right? The systems don't work the way they do because they think that that's how fighting works in the real world. The systems work the way they do because that's an interesting way to have systems work.
Except like, fucking, it makes anyone who's focusing on martial arts unusable for the first fucking 20 uses of their weapon, which is awful.
If you even think about, like, I'm going to use these martial arts, they seem cool. Like, yeah, you won't do any damage, and the characters will build up agility, which doesn't even scale with the martial art. Then you'll just be confused.
I did say interesting, not good.
Yeah, but like...
It's not a great play experience, but it is interesting, and it is fresh, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, I can also see why they fucking stopped this shit. Like, oh man, I feel like SaGa went as a whole went in a different direction and went more towards the Final Fantasy II develop skills that you use with a bunch of different characters that basically started romancing SaGa. But I will say this, if you're going to play SaGa 1, play the WonderSwan Color version, because you can emulate that, and there's a fan translation, and there's multiple save slots, and there's a bunch of quality of life fixes that you will appreciate, even if you don't appreciate it, and that's the point. Like, you don't know pain until you're like, oh no, I don't know what my Esper did. Why doesn't she have the thing I have on her? Oh, it turns out that like four battles ago, she replaced it randomly with ESP.
Always with ESP, yeah. I really want to try the WonderSwan Color version, actually. I enjoyed these games enough that I can see myself coming back to them.
Yeah.
And if I do, I will not play the Game Boy version. Although, I don't know what the WonderSwan Color version looks like. The Game Boy version...
It looks like a game. I think I called it the Dawn of Souls version for SaGa 1. It's basically like kind of Game Boy Advance era Square Enix pixel art.
Yeah. Because I really liked the way this game looks. I possibly wouldn't have liked it quite so much on an actual Game Boy, like an original Game Boy screen, which it's clearly designed for. Like, those screens are pretty muddy because it's 1988 technology. But on an emulator screen, obviously on a backlit monitor where the backdrop colour is a little bit stronger, I thought it looked incredible. In SaGa 1, when you step out of the starting town first, the game starts, you go to the guild, you recruit the rest of your party, you have started as a female human, always start as a female human so that you can sell the default weapon and get loads of money and buy equipment for your whole party. You go to the door to the tower and it's locked, so you leave town to look for the sphere that you need to open it. And you step out of town into... I mean, it almost looks like a glitch. It's just completely blank field with two sprites on it, which is the town sprite and the character sprite. And almost the whole first world is like that. It's just these square or rectangular islands with the occasional town sprite or tree sprite with square sections of water between them. Every mountain range is square. It's so stark and so non-naturalistic. Again, it's just a nice contrast to what we usually used to seeing as the visual design values of a JRPG.
I don't even think it's a stretch to call SaGa a precursor to Yumi Nikki and stuff like that, because it accomplished almost like a dreamlike presentation and storytelling on the Game Boy. Like, there are these large contrasts between the aesthetic of just one room to another. Like, there's no physical or direct connection between spaces sometimes. Like, you'll be in the tower, you'll go in a door, and then it's just like a beach. And then you hang out in this small beach room, there's nothing in it, there's no reason for it to be there, and you leave, and you keep going down the tower.
Yeah. It really reminded me of your visual essay, actually. The one with the RPG Maker screenshots next to the abstract art.
Yeah.
Like, I'd love to see something like that just for SaGa 1, because it's particularly the environments, but it's also the monsters. The monsters are a really great collection of monochrome pixel art.
Most of the monsters are NPCs too. Like, the whole world's populated by mostly things that aren't humans, and humans aren't even like the dominant people or culture, and it's not really commented on. It's just like, this is how this world is.
Yeah, in the first world, one of the storylines is they say, oh, there's a girl that the king and the bandit king are quarreling over, basically, and then you meet the girl and she's an octopus.
Well, based on her sprite, she's either a slime or beholder.
Yeah.
Is it? I passed that as like
that's
an Octorok type model.
That's just what that sprite correlates to at the actual monster design for some reason.
But yeah, like, it's... And it's weird because I don't remember any point where there's any suggestion of kind of species tension.
No.
It's just that these icons are being treated as interchangeable. And given how bad video games usually are at species tension as a narrative point, it was really welcome. Like, it felt really kind and gentle as an environment.
I read that as just a complete lack of detail, though. Like, not saying anything is, in some forms, a kindness, but I feel like it was just, they don't have room for developing anything past what they wanted to jam in there, shouting, you scum, at a dead man that you just killed. You disgust me.
Oh, for sure, but like that's my response to it. I don't think that's a design goal or anything. It's just like, oh, this is just nice. This is a place where all the people I'd follow on queer Twitter could come and actually just live out their shit posts about how they want to date monsters and things.
I mean, I think to some extent, obviously, I wouldn't say this game's all intentional, but there are things like the fact that the game has no frame story that feels really intentional, because even games of the time, they put it in the manual or something, if not actually in the text. But in the manual for SaGa 1, it's just like, oh, there's a tower, and you want to climb it. Everyone wants to climb it, and you want to climb it too. And that's the whole story. And then you play more of the game, and there's like the Dragon Quest arcs, but the frame story itself, it's kind of just like misdirected, or even like
it's board gamey, really.
I don't even know about that. Because the board game would have, you have to get through this, like in a solo board game, you have to get through this tower and fight the God King at the end, who's evil, but SaGa doesn't have that framing. The creator isn't evil or anything. There's no like narrative tension going on. It's just like,
well, I'm thinking kind of more abstract board games, like your Snakes and Ladders or Ludo, those sorts of board games, rather than the more kind of narrativized ones. Like, you just need to get to the end of this structure. Which goes back to the point I made at the beginning about your kind of collectathon Mario 64, Mario World stuff. Obviously, in Mario there is this frame narrative, but this doesn't even have that. It's just, here is a structure of levels that you go through because that's what they're there for. You know, the reason to do this stuff is because that's what playing the game entails. If you want to play this game, you do those things. It's a very kind of stark logic to it, of just, like, here's the game, play it or don't.
And again, I'm not gonna, like, when I say it's intentional, I feel like they didn't want to have a motive there, but I don't think they had like artistic goals behind it. They're just like, yeah, I don't know, this one, you're just gonna climb the tower, that's our game. But it actually reminds me of modernist novels, and I'm not saying they're trying to go for that high art thing. Yeah, I mean, they just really didn't care. But when game designers approach this way, it's like a coin flip between you getting a really rigid and toy-like thing, like a platformer, like Becky's saying, or you'll end up getting like a really fucked up dream hell game, which a lot of old PC games were, which they just kind of had a lazy frame story and weird graphics. Like, if you go back and play the original Duke Nukem games, the 2D ones by Apogee, they're just actually, they look like more like alt games than they like a shooter would at the time. And like, what I mean is, when I say it's like a modernist novel, is like, when you actually defeat the creator, I mean, you're not doing it to stop their tyranny or anything. You just did it because you felt like it, and they're up at the tower, and the creator made fun of you. You got mad at him. I don't know. But when you actually defeat the creator, there's a door that leads somewhere, but you never get to know where. You don't know. The party's like, you know what? Actually, we don't care. We're not going to open the door. We don't want any more. We don't want to figure out the mystery. We don't want to know what's behind the door. We climbed the tower and killed God, and that's all. That's it. That's what we came for. They don't want to know.
That's a legitimately better killing God ending than like any other JRPG I've ever played.
They don't want to know God's secrets. They don't want to see the other worlds. They're done.
I'm gutted I didn't finish the game now. That's amazing.
Oh, you didn't know the ending, Becky. And
yeah, I didn't look it up. But...
And then, so like, I was like looking back on it, I'm confused. I don't know if the game's like celebrating the journey itself, or if it's like a death of the author thing, and it doesn't matter that God's dead. You just go back to life, just continues how it was before. Like, I don't know. It's just like this huge statement of like futility or asceticism or denial, and it's just like really lazily done without any intention of being like that.
The ending of SaGa 1 is also complete bullshit anyway, because you get to the top of the tower, and in the last section, is it right before the final boss or the last sub-boss, is a tile that's a fall tile, and you have to do the last staircase.
It's right in front of the sub-boss, Ashura or something.
Yeah, it's only in the center.
That's right. And Ashura is the one that you think you've gone up there to fight, that is kind of vaguely foreshadowed a couple of times.
Mm-hmm. And
then you fight Ashura and get returned to the bottom of the tower for like no explanation, just magically boom, bottom of the tower, and then you have to climb the fucking thing again with a completely different set of levels.
The creator taunts you too. He's like, now you have to climb the tower, the real tower this time, and you're just like, what?
Ah, man.
Yeah, but also when that happens, all the people who are dead that you didn't want to be dead are back, and everything's happy, and you don't have to actually worry about anything, except when you leave town, there's still monsters and shit. So, like, you can still be an adventurer if you want to. So, like, when that happens, everything kind of just gets set to something close to an idyllic little hamlet. And then you go up to the door and you're just like, I just killed God. I don't want to go through this. I have like a town to go back to.
I think it kind of ties into what I was saying about the systems too, in that it's I wouldn't say it's not like the opposite of a JRPG, but it's kind of like a light subversion of it. Like, because the party has their clear goal in sight, but then they just said, they just like, it's like they never really had that goal in the first place, and then they just left, like their journey had no purpose. And then that's kind of like how the level systems work, is like they don't have this very clear goal to them, and then they don't like necessarily bend to your will, and they don't go how you want them to. And that's not how SaGa 2 ends, though, but that's how SaGa 1 ends.
Well, SaGa 2 does have a bit more of a plot, but what interests me about SaGa 2 is that you do SaGa 1 in the first act of SaGa 2. Like, you go into the tower and you progress through it, and then you kill Ashura. And then the game keeps going, and you meet Apollo, who thanks you for killing the final boss of the game. Like, literally the first cutscene with Apollo is he goes, "Oh, you killed Ashura, and that's great. Well done. Isn't this lovely?" And you do some, like, minor shit in Apollo's world, and then you return to his temple at the end of the world, and he's gone. Shout out to the sprite for Apollo as well, because I laughed.
Drink Apollo.
He's amazing. And, like, I literally laughed for several minutes because all the gods are double height sprites, or even triple height, I think. And Apollo is just, like, all leg. It's incredible. And there's a great moment later on, I think it's when Isis joins your party.
Yeah.
Because you meet her and she's a god, and she's the tall sprite, and she goes, "Oh wait, we can't." She
this.
joins your party, and then she goes, "Oh wait, I can't go with you just yet," and transforms into a small sprite.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. And it's still not the best visual trick that the game plays, because there's that one world that has like a human town and a giant town. And the human town, you go into it, and the human town is a town on the map. And then you go east from there, and they use mountain and cliff textures to build the giant town out of. And it's just on the world map as the giant town, which is... I think SaGa 2, when it does things like that, it feels really playful with what we're already, I guess, the established formal language of the JRPG, the top-down 2D JRPG. And it feels like a product of an understanding of that form. Yeah. Oh, of course we can do this. Like, this is a thing that is possible within the toolkit, and here's a way to make it interesting to engage with.
I mean, I think it's equal parts understanding to some level, but also not giving a fuck. As in, they're not,
yeah.
They're not trying to be really respectable about it, and they're not trying to tell this epic story. So they're like, well, this place is gonna be a dragon racetrack because we feel like it.
Yeah.
A dragon racetrack where the easiest time is you picking the slowest dragon, which is fucking goofy.
They bait you, actually. You're like, I want the fast one.
And that's why I called it playful. Right, there's no overarching plan about it. It's just, oh, this would be cool. We could do this, and they do. And I think because the spirit of playfulness comes through in it, more often it works than not. It's never self-serious or self-important about it.
It reminds me of Live a Live, except without the big giant frustration and agonizing about JRPGs at the end. Like SaGa.
Sorry, go on.
Okay, SaGa 2 has like all these genres. Like it has an Edo period too, where it just goes through an Edo period drama for some reason. But they're not like they're just kind of.
It's like a Saturday morning cartoon without Live a Live's attempt at being like, also there's a big bad at the end and we want to say something about the genre. It's just like, no, this is a cartoon. We want to have fun.
I mean, I feel like Live Alive more or less succeeds with that stuff, but I realize I'm more enthusiastic about that game than you are.
Yeah, I mean Live a Live's great, but I guess what SaGa 2 is doing almost is it's putting this tension between, like, it's just put stuff in a hat weirdness, it's SaGa elements and more typical JRPG elements, and while highlighting the absurdity of both. And so as it puts just more genres into its hat, it feels like you can't grab onto the thread anymore. It just gets more and more dreamlike and weird. But it's not like SaGa 1, which actually kind of felt really serious and melancholy about it. It's more like goofy.
It's the sort of goofy that prompts a really anime as shit DS remake. God, the art for that is so anime.
What else do you want to say about these
I don't
games?
know. These games are fucking weird.
The narrative arcs in Saga 2 are better told, I guess. And the frame story has more pathos, at least.
Yeah, even though, like, your dad's Indiana Jones, no matter what gender or species you are. It's weird.
I think it's kind of, I don't know, I think it's kind of distracting, though. I didn't like the story as much in Saga 2, I found.
I feel like it was a more competent, like, narrative and had more competent storytelling, but also, like...
How many times do they try to convince you that the dad is dead?
Like 4.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's completely unnecessary.
Oh, I'm so sad. This person I don't know is dead, but he's my dad. That's why I'm sad.
Yep.
Oh no, I was a fully grown robot 5 years younger when I last saw him, and he never came back from diving out a window. What the fuck?
I don't want to say Saga 2 has more filler because they're games that are entirely filler. They're both technically filler, but I think like the length of Saga 1 gives it a better economy of space and concepts or something.
Yeah, and because it's only 4 worlds rather than like 10, each one gets a little bit more room to breathe.
Yeah.
And it's easy to say Saga 1 has less story, but actually there is story there, and there's always a little bit more than just the video game bit. Just a tiny bit at every stage, and I think particularly the ruined future world, the Chrono Trigger world, I think that one worked quite well. Where, like, every encounter when you're outside in on the surface is the boss of the zone, and you just have to run away.
I think it was less Chrono Trigger and more like Akira.
It's like cyberpunk shit, basically.
Yeah. I'm shitposting when I say it's Chrono Trigger, but that's
I'm gonna slap you.
Well, it's what somebody playing it now would think.
The Chrono Trigger level.
Yeah, great.
The first world's Chrono Trigger, and the fourth world's Chrono Trigger.
In the middle two, who cares? This is a Chrono Trigger sandwich.
What a horrible thought.
Gugh. Yeah, no, like, I feel like these games are interesting to go back to, and fucking, I had something else I wanted to say, but whatever. I think go for it.
Oh, no, wait, you finished. Mines are stupid. I don't know why I was even talking.
I was just gonna say that this is interesting to go back to, and I also know that these are not entirely representative of the Saga series as a whole. Like, I know these are way too goofy, and also they have too many goofy mechanics attached to them that I know aren't in, like, Romancing Saga and later, which was, like, the primary focus. And I guess people don't like Final Fantasy Legend 3/Saga 3. I don't know why. I'm gonna probably get around to the DS remake at some point and find out. But it was interesting seeing, like, this really early Game Boy game doing some interesting stuff. Also, like, they're not, like, gripping games when it comes to difficulty for most of them, because, like, once you get to the end, it's ruthless and I hate it. But a lot of the time it's just like, oh, what did my Esper do?
The thing, I mean,
what's the sword do? That's the difficulty.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that the difficulty is much less structured. Like, because the bosses are so quick, the difficulty is much more which random encounters you get on the way.
Yeah.
I like that style that's much more about kind of depletion and the progression of time. Then you do a bunch of trivial stuff, and then there's a massive difficulty spike for every boss. Like, there's a continuity to the combat. It's all about managing a toolkit as it depletes through the level, rather than doing one set of things through the level and then a completely different thing for the boss.
It can be more stressful than normal, though, too, especially when you get, like, stuff you can only find in chests. You're like, do I use this now? Should I cast Flare? Am I going to get Flare later? I don't know.
The answer is yes, you can just buy Flare in both of these games.
I didn't know. Well, Flares are too expensive in Saga 1 to, like, actually get another copy of it. You get one and you're like, alright, that's it, that's my Flare. But yeah, in Saga 2 I had a bunch. But when I got one in Nasty Dungeon, I didn't know I could get more, and I was like, oh.
I will definitely say that, like, probably play Wondrous One Color or the DS remake for 2, just because they'll probably be easier to go back to.
Yeah. Playing Saga 1 with only one save file is... I mean, you can save anywhere, which feels like an anachronism, but really isn't.
Yeah.
And is great, but there's only the one save file, so if you save halfway through a dungeon, that makes getting out really difficult.
Not to mention, on top of that, there's no Pokemon teleport to the nearest inn or safe zone or whatever once you die. It's just kick you to title screen so you can lock your save, and it's awful, honestly.
It happened to me, and that's why I didn't finish the game.
I thought it happened to me, and I panicked, basically. What happened is when I fought the creator, I save stated inside of his dialogue, and that was my only save. And I was like, why did I do that?
Oh, God.
I couldn't. I would fight him, and the same exact events would happen. I was really confused. I didn't know how to manipulate the fight. But actually, as it turns out, I think if I do different attacks or different inputs, it'll actually change the monster's like attack pattern. Like, because every time it was the same thing because I was doing the same fight back at him. Mm-hmm. But when I just started inputting random moves, I was actually able to win because the creator wouldn't spam cure and live forever. And it was it was really surprising when I won because it was like 3 turns in and they're just dead. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is, because the combat's so fast, it is kind of possible if you're in a situation where you can't reset the RNG to like actually map out what roles the game is doing, what random roles the game is doing. But it's often very difficult to manipulate those because it makes a role for every character for turn order, which is a big chunk of roles that you can't shift. I did try doing that to RNG manipulate some loot a couple of times in SaGa 2, but
SaGa 2 is awful for it. Like, I looked up the tasks listing, and it just like, yeah, these memory addresses increment when these fucking 7 things happen, and the 7 things were all tied to a single, like, memory address, and it was just like, whether you'll hit, whether you'll be able to run away, how much damage you do, and it's just like, holy shit, I just want this Esper ability, but, like, I can't keep doing this, and the guide being like, oh yeah, just keep resetting and then tweaking your fight until you get these specific abilities sucked. That's why I cheated. Yeah,
the guide saying, oh, just keep resetting the RNG to get this, it's impossible. The only way to reliably advance the RNG is to get extra random encounters, which comes with a massive risk of further depletion.
Yep. Also,
so that was fun.
Also, I'm gonna bring this up now. I've never, like, before maybe like the final dungeon, or the, like, when you're approaching where Apollo is and you get to do all that shit. That was the only place where I was just like, I'm gonna run from this fight. Oh no, I can't run. That was the first time in the entire game that it was like, no, can't run. It's a random chance, but I don't know what the percent is. But then, the entire stretch after you get Isis, you're not allowed to run at all.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think it's random, because when I got to Apollo's place, I tried running over and over again. I tried like 4 or 5 times, and I wasn't allowed to run. I think once you're just in that top of the tower, you can't run.
Basically, it's so the monsters are in tiers, and there are 10 tiers of monster, and all tier 10 monsters are unrunnable, and then every other tier. I don't think I ever failed running away in SaGa 2 ever, and I did a lot of running away.
I ended up turning my monster into something with warning, so I never got surprise attacked. Because when you do run away, it boosts your chances of getting surprise attacked. And if you do it in sequence, you end up getting jumped, like, a lot. So I ended up, yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's really fucking mean!
I don't know if I had that, but, like, there are only a very small number of monsters that can ambush you if you're on par for agility, so...
my mutant had warning, I think. That's what I did.
I never got warning, but I was okay.
Yeah, I got some monster with warning, and I was just like, okay, now I can run away from everything. And then it was just like, can't run. I was just like, okay, fuck you. I will just annihilate you with Flare and P-Blast, because I'm done with this shit.
Pretty much.
I'm glad Isis had Flare. I would have actually not been able to clear the last dungeon.
God. I don't know how much more we can say about these games. They're interesting, but probably not, like, super approachable in their original forms.
Use a guide. Don't be
definitely use a guide.
Well, I've beat these games before. That's why I was like, I don't need a guide this time. It was kind of just like I was working off my old memory of them, and I used a guide before when I played them the first time.
Yeah, use a walkthrough, but also just have, like, a table up of what fucking items are assigned to which stat.
I still had item references because I can't remember. I don't know what a coral sword is. I don't know how much attack power it has. I can't remember these things. The game doesn't tell you.
Yeah.
That is the biggest downfall of the originals. They just literally don't have enough space on screen to be like, this is what this does. The WonderSwan Color versions and the DS versions definitely do have that, which is why I will recommend them. Like, they'll say, hey, this is the stat change, so you don't have to so you don't have to buy them and be like, oh, will this go up or down or do something else? And ugh. Also, I just want to say, I really love the concept of the robot as a class. Like, it's a really neat thing.
I like the robot and the human both as like these really hard fail-safes. If you fucked up your game, it's okay. You have these really overpowered classes.
Yeah, we haven't gone over the robot because we talked about the SaGa 1 classes and then just fucking ignore the robot. The robot, basically, I mentioned that weapons have durability. When you equip something to a robot, it gains stats based on that piece of gear. But also for weapons, it has the durability, but they will regain to that full new durability if they stayed in or whatever. So it makes the whole worrying about durability thing a little less, like, worrying.
You do have to be careful, though, because the reduction in durability is permanent, like the reduction in durability cap is permanent, and they also halve durability in the same way when you unequip something from a robot.
Yes. I don't know if that's true in the remake, but in the first one, that's definitely true.
And that's quite annoying. If you don't spot it at first, and then you end up like passing equipment from the robot onto other things, and they have 5 uses. It's like, where did that go?
Yeah.
Shit.
Also, I like the fucking Magi system. It's kind of like the Jin thing, except less varied. It's just kind of like, what stats do you want? And also some of them grant you a thing you can use. And the Aegis Magi was really good.
Mm-hmm.
I like 2 overarching pasting things SaGa 2 does systems wise. Like, when you die in SaGa 2, you get to you can retry the battle because of the god Odin. He's just like, you can retry as many times as you want as long as you promise me that you'll fight me in in Valhalla. And then you actually get to Valhalla and you do fight Odin, and then that failsafe is gone. If you die, you're booted back to the title screen because Odin's dead. And that like immediately raises the stakes a lot. And then once you get all the magic, once you get all the orbs and Apollo steals them, you won't have them anymore. They're gone because all the magic form together or form Isis, the goddess of the world. And so that like I was relying on magic the whole game to make my human useful, and I lost that, and now my human was useless. But that was another way the game like just used the system it had and then like took it away from you to raise the stakes at the very end.
Yeah. I never got to see Odin because I was cheating to expedite things, but yeah, I like what Odin does in terms of like, if you get a total party wipe, seeing him and him being like, okay, I'll raise you, but you need to fight me. And then you actually getting to do that and that safety net being on, that's cool. I never saw that, so he just fought me wordlessly, and it was really weird.
Yeah.
I died a bunch of times, so I was glad.
Also, I really appreciate Isis actually has a lot of Magi equipped when she joins the party, so like you can use like Pegasus or Prism or whatever, you can just use those in her inventory, and it's cool. But like, it's super jarring to be like, oh yeah, I was using all these things, and now, nope, just yanked them out of your characters. It was really just like, oh fuck, no, I was gonna warp back, but now I don't have Pegasus. That sucks.
But it's cool. It's cool to have a big paradigm shift in what characters are capable of that is negative. Mm-hmm. And that lasts. Because normally, what a game would do is it would take that away from you from one level, and at the end of the level, you defeat the boss and you get the power back.
I mean, technically you do for like an instant, and then it's turned into Isis.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have 2 more questions.
Wait, just to finish, I used to prefer SaGa 2, but now I think I prefer SaGa 1. Mostly and only because the ending of SaGa 2 is kind of boring to me. I can't like get a lot out of the Arsenal encounter, and the existence of Isis and what she does is about as nothing and like denial serving as like not going in the door at the end of SaGa 1. But not going to the end of the door at SaGa 1 actually carries a lot more meaning than you revived a goddess and you don't know what she does and you don't know if she's good or bad at the end.
I mean, she's she does have a stated purpose. Like,
I mean, that's what she says, but Apollo also says he's the protector of the world and he's the good god. And so
she's not a protector, she's a custodian. She's cleaning shit up. Like, she's cleaning up the mess that Apollo made. That's her job.
But then Arsenal's job is to protect the world, and she says it goes haywire when she's revived. That's kind of a coincidence, isn't it?
I think it was going haywire before she was revived.
It didn't, like, there was no indication either way.
It's not clear whether it goes haywire because she's revived or it goes haywire because Apollo uses the Magi.
Yeah, and those are separate events.
They're separate but very closely connected events, so it could be either spin or both.
Well, once you have all the Magi, all the Magi only does one thing, and that's forms Isis. So
yeah, except like your dad is just like, hey, don't put the Magi together, don't do it.
Yeah, he says it's a bad thing, and then Isis comes, and then you're like, it's a good thing? Anyways, that's all I'm saying. It's not like... I can get more meaning out of the ending of SaGa 1 than SaGa 2, is all I'm saying. But, in my opinion, I think both of these games are better than any 2D Final Fantasy. And, yeah, come at me, nerds.
I'd still probably prefer Final Fantasy V just because that's some goofy nonsense you can pull in that game. I want to fight a robot by swinging swords at it forever.
Final Fantasy V is probably the most similar to these games, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Including how broken you can make your party. Break everything. Okay, we have questions. Do either of you have more comments you want to make before questions?
No.
Nope.
Okay. From John Tyre. How much trouble did the Smasher give y'all?
A bit. I lost my first attempt at Arsenal to the Smasher, but not that much.
I had the hardest time with Apollo and timing my cures right, and I also didn't realize that. Like, I didn't think of putting items on my dad, so that's actually why I struggled with the Apollo fight a lot. All my characters were just dying to him, and I couldn't do anything. I think I died like 4 or 5 times on Apollo, and I didn't die once against Arsenal. I had everything set up to... I was really overgeared, and I had everything set up to fight basically the creator of SaGa 1, because I was expecting a fight about that hard, and then I was like, oh, I don't know. I just, like, beat the Arsenal. Didn't really struggle with it very much, surprisingly.
I was more in awe of the animation that they gave the fucking Smasher than the damage it put out. Like, I was just like, okay, I'm good.
Do you know how the Apollo fights works? Is it just you have to survive a certain number of turns or something?
The Apollo fight is, like, the first 5 turns are him opening up with...
yeah, I know it's a pattern, but, like, do you need to deal a certain amount of damage?
No, it's just, he just has a shit ton of health.
Oh, really? So, yeah, I mean, the Apollo fight was way harder for some reason. My characters are just too slow. So if he would kill a character every turn, and I can only use heart once, but I timed my heart better, and I was able to beat him on, like, my 5th try.
I never got to use heart. I was too good.
I never got to use heart because the times I needed to use it, the character who was going to use it died before they could use it.
I might have got lucky against Arsenal. I did use heart against Arsenal as well, though, but... Arsenal had a lot less health, and I was all glass cannon-y, so it just went down.
From Widrick, chainsaw best weapon, yes or yes?
Yes. I never used it on anything.
Yeah, because you're a fool.
I
saw the creator in half. That's some wicked shit.
That's some Bayonetta shit. Creator, to be fair.
In my first playthrough SaGa, I bought like 3 chainsaws, and I would just use them in every fight. Because I thought it was really funny that it just always worked. And yeah, I used it on the creator, which was satisfying. The thing is, when I used it on the creator, it was satisfying, but I didn't know how satisfying, because I didn't know how hard the fight is. Yeah. The fight fucking sucks, so I recommend just using it as a chainsaw.
Yeah, I saw, like, oh yeah, he'll start casting these awful attacks every turn once you get him below a certain threshold. Let's just get him down from 100% then. Let's not do that.
The thing is, he doesn't have a lot of life, but you won't have a set thing clear in 1 turn unless you got 4 humans, because you're a baby. And so... if he just happens to cure after every other round, you're going to be an infinite loop, and he'll be casting flare at that point because you hit him to a certain threshold. But then you'll cure, and then he'll keep casting flare like an asshole. And yeah, I hated that. I was like panicking. I'm like, I have to restart the game. Am I done?
Yeah, like that's some bullshit MMO hard and rage bullshit. No, you better burn me down right now, or I'm going to keep casting flare until you fucking die. Ugh. Okay. That's everything. Thanks for joining us for this episode of DGC. Next month, we'll take a look at Lunar Silver Star Story. This is a PlayStation port of a Sega Saturn remake of a Sega CD JRPG, which is the first game in the Lunar series, which consists of 4 distinct games with 3 remakes and 1 reimagining of the first game and 1 remake each for the second and third game. This is not available anywhere legally, so emulation is, once again, the best option. There's also a PSP port that you can play legally, but I don't know that it's similar enough to carry the same experience. It is, however, $15 on the PlayStation Store. After that, we're playing Luminous Arc, a tactical RPG developed by the now defunct Image Epoch for the Nintendo DS. Although the game received 2 sequels under the company's direction, the third game was never released in English, and the fourth game, developed by another company, was only released after they had officially gone bankrupt. There are no more recent options for playing Luminous Arc than its original release, but it's a DS game and can thus be emulated to a reasonable degree. You can find our work on our website, jrpgsaredead.fyi, or our Twitter at jrpgsaredead, or individually at Invisifool for me, at Eat the Pen for Becky, and at Was Not Why Not for Leroy. You can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/deadgenre. Also, please enjoy our new affiliated podcasts. Leroy and John Thayer, who you heard a question from earlier, can be found on World Revolution discussing independent and underground RPGs, and I'm joined by Sam Howett on Myth and Kin as we work our way through the Witcher franchise from books to games. Both can be found on our Libsyn feed. Join us next time for episode 28 of Dead Genre Chronicles. Good night, everybody.